we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital. We'll get you a roundup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. Leaders of France, Germany, and Poland will hold emergency talks on Ukraine in Berlin. This after Polish Prime Minister met with U.S. President Joe Biden in Washington. European Parliament adopts groundbreaking law to safeguard media freedom, independence of newsroom, and limit the use of spyware against reporters. The UK government is mulling a plan to send rejected asylum seekers to Rwanda voluntarily and will reportedly pay them up to $3,800 to make the move. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida grilled by lawmakers over a gathering of ruling party members at which scantily clad female dancers were reportedly told to use their mouths to receive cash tips. At least 2 people killed and 26 injured in a deadly explosion caused by a suspected gas leak at a restaurant in China's northern province of Hebei. We begin in the United States and the race for the White House. The sequel, 4 years in the making, is officially set. President Joe Biden will face off against Donald Trump in a rematch of their 2020 race. President Biden and Donald Trump have both secured their party's nominations. Not such an election has occurred in nearly 70 years. In fact, in 1956, Republican President Dwight D. Eisenhower once again defeated Adlai Stevenson, the Democratic opponent he had 4 years ago. Also, there has been just one U.S. president who returned to the White House for a non-consecutive term, Grover Cleveland. He was America's 22nd and 24th president. Donald Trump is hoping to replicate that success of President Cleveland. Trump clinched the required 1,215 delegates to secure the Republican presidential nomination as 4 states held contests, including Georgia, the battleground state where he faces criminal charges for attempting to overturn the 2020 election results. In a video posted on social media, Trump said there is no time to celebrate. Instead, the focus is on beating Biden, who he called the worst president in U.S. history. In fact, hours earlier, President Biden passed the number of delegates required as results from primaries in Georgia, Mississippi, Washington State, the Northern Mariana Islands, and Democrats living abroad came in. President Biden took aim at what he called Trump's campaign of resentment, revenge, and retribution. Now, President Biden only faced token opposition in the Democratic primary. However, he is facing growing frustration from liberal activists over Washington's handling of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. A rising influx of migrants at the Mexico border is also a weakness for President Biden's campaign. The president is also under intense scrutiny following the release of Special Counsel Robert Hur's report, which concluded that Biden mishandled classified information after leaving the White House. Now, Hur testified on Capitol Hill on Tuesday, saying he did not believe there was enough evidence to charge Joe Biden with a crime.
There has been a lot of attention paid to language in the report about the president's memory, so let me say a few words about that. My task was to determine whether the president retained or disclosed national defense information willfully. My assessment in the report about the relevance of the president's memory was necessary and accurate and fair. Most importantly, what I wrote is what I believe the evidence shows and what I expect jurors would perceive and believe. I did not sanitize my explanation, nor did I disparage the president unfairly.
The rematch that was long anticipated is expected to mirror the 2020 campaign, though Donald Trump is facing 91 felony counts across 4 separate indictments. Now, these include charges related to allegations that he plotted to overturn the 2020 election defeat, played a lead role in the January 2021 insurrection at the Capitol, illegally took classified documents from the White House, and covered up hush money payments to an adult film star ahead of the 2016 election. He is scheduled to become the first former American president to go on trial in a criminal case. That case begins on March 25th in New York. Staying in the United States, lawmakers on Capitol Hill are taking aim at the popular social media app TikTok. Security agencies have raised the alarm over the national security threat posed by the Chinese-owned app. Now, U.S. lawmakers are set to vote on a bill that could ban the app in the United States. And outrage is growing as some TikTok users in the United States are protesting against this bill. Meanwhile, Beijing has slammed the move, accusing Washington of bullying. Our next report takes you inside the fight on Capitol Hill.
Millions of Americans may soon have to bid adieu to TikTok. US lawmakers are all set to vote on a bill that could potentially ban the short video app. If approved, the bill, called Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act, will force TikTok to cut ties with its Chinese parent company ByteDance. It will force the Chinese firm to sell the app within a time period of 180 days, or face a ban from Apple and Google app stores in the United States. TikTok is a widely popular short video app with about 170 million American users. A potential ban has left American TikTok users anxious.
Any ban on TikTok is not just banning the freedom of expression. You are literally causing huge harm to our national economy. We have small business owners that are here and small business owners from across the country that use TikTok to move our economy forward.
This app is so much more than just an app for dumb TikTok dances. So when I hear these elected officials literally mock and make fun of TikTok and its creators, I'm disgusted. This is a life-changing app. So many people, not only 5 million small businesses rely on it, but 170 million people rely on this app for more than just their livelihood. They rely on this app for their mental health.
TikTok's Chinese ownership has raised security concerns over the safety of users' data, as many people worry about the application's potential subservience to the Chinese government.
I am highly concerned about our data being collected and being misused by both foreign adversaries and also domestic companies. But this bill does not fix that problem, let's be honest here. This bill doesn't fix it. We could pass this, it could get signed tomorrow, I hope it doesn't. And in 6 months, in a year, we'll be back at the same conversation, possibly talking about some other social media platform that's misusing our data.
The potential ban also comes just months ahead of the US presidential elections. Earlier, US spy chief Avril Haines warned that China could use TikTok to influence the election. An intelligence community report also backed the claim. The report said TikTok accounts run by a Chinese government propaganda arm targeted candidates during the 2022 midterm election cycle. FBI Director Christopher Wray also raised an alarm over TikTok. He said that Americans need to assess whether they want the Chinese government to control their data and compromise their devices. TikTok's owners are not just battling security concerns. The short video app may also spiral into a political bone of contention between 2 presidential candidates, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Though the Biden campaign launched a TikTok account to reach out to young voters, President Biden himself says he would sign the bill to ban the app if it reaches his desk. His opponent in the 2024 race and former US President Donald Trump, however, has taken a U-turn from his old stance. Trump said he is against a ban on TikTok. Donald Trump added that a ban would strengthen Instagram and Facebook's parent company, Meta, that he has labeled as an enemy of the people. In 2020, Trump attempted to wrest control of TikTok from ByteDance. However, the move was blocked by the US courts. Many believe that Trump's change of tune is because a major TikTok investor, Jeff Yass, is donating to his campaign. The former president has denied such claims. While Americans await the decision on TikTok's future, the social media app continues to be a battleground for the two US presidential candidates, Biden and Trump.
And now to Russia. Voters are head to the polls in just 2 days when Vladimir Putin is expected to secure another 6-year term as president. Still, the Russian president is pulling out all the stops as voting soon gets underway. In a ploy to rile up nationalist sentiment, Putin said, and I'm quoting, "From a military point of view, we are ready for nuclear war." Certainly not the first time Putin has presented nuclear war as a real or imaginary threat. Meanwhile, anti-Putin fighters launched an attack on Russia.
Tonight, a special liberation operation was launched by the United Forces of Russian Volunteer Units, the Freedom of Russia Legion, the Russian Volunteer Corps, and the Siberian Battalion. 3 divisions entered the territory of Russia in 2 places, in the Kursk region and in Belgorod region. And in fact, all this is timed to the so-called elections. We, the citizens of Russia, have decided that we have the right and the desire to participate in these elections, and thus we started participating.
Armed fighters who claim to be Russian citizens initiated the attack from Ukrainian territory. They launched the ground offensive in the regions of Belgorod and Kursk in western Russia. Ukraine says these fighters acted independently. Meanwhile, Russia says the armed fighters intended to disrupt the upcoming presidential election. Moscow claims that it was successful in thwarting the attack, killing over 230 intruders and destroying several tanks.
This morning, units of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, together with the units of the Border Service of the Federal Security Service of Russia, thwarted an attempt by the Kiev regime to make a breakthrough into the border territory of the Russian Federation in the Belgorod and Kursk regions. Around 3 a.m., after intense shelling of civilian objects, Ukrainian terrorist formations supported by tanks and armored fighting vehicles attempted to invade Russian territory on 3 fronts.
Now, in response, Putin ordered a massive air assault on Ukraine in a clear message to Kyiv's leadership. Hundreds of cruise missiles hit several cities, including the hometown of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. President Zelensky has confirmed that the attack on his hometown left 3 dead civilians with another 38 wounded. Meanwhile, the United States has announced a military package for Ukraine worth over $300 million, in which is much needed relief for Kyiv.
So today, on behalf of President Biden, I'm announcing an emergency package of security assistance of $300 million worth of weapons and equipment to address some of Ukraine's pressing needs. This emergency package that we're announcing contains a large tranche of artillery rounds and gimlers for the Himars. It is assistance that Ukraine desperately needs to hold the line against Russian attacks and to push back against the continuing Russian onslaught in the east and in other parts of Ukraine. This ammunition will keep Ukraine's guns firing for a period, but only a short period. It is nowhere near enough to meet Ukraine's battlefield needs, and it will not prevent Ukraine from running out of ammunition in the weeks to come.
After the announcement by Washington, Russian President Putin warned the U.S. of fanning flames. He also accused the U.S. of meddling in Russia's upcoming presidential elections. With voting on the near horizon, President Vladimir Putin is wooing his base, and he is not holding back on any front. We now turn to Africa, where conflict has escalated in Sudan. The Sudanese army and rival paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, are engaged in heavy fighting. This comes after the Sudanese army refused a United Nations-backed truce for the holy month of Ramadan. Heavy gunfire filled the skies in Sudan's greater capital area, and the fighting in Sudan has lasted for more than 10 months now. The leaders of the Sudanese army and the paramilitary forces are vying to become leaders of the North African nation. The latest skirmishes took place in the city of Omdurman, which is separated from the capital city of Khartoum by the Nile River. And Omdurman, which was once a stronghold for the paramilitary forces, has now seen the army's presence for the first time. The Sudanese army captured the headquarters of the state broadcast building for radio and television services, a move that has been welcomed by their supporters.
It's like our heart has been restored in the right place to beat again. I thank the army soldiers for restoring our heart in the right place, because it had stopped since these rebel rapid support forces occupied the radio and television building.
Meanwhile, the Sudanese army released body cam footage of the battle in Omdurman. The army troopers can be seen patrolling the streets with several buildings and vehicles in the background completely destroyed. Residential buildings in Omdurman can be seen riddled with bullet holes after the Sudanese armies liberated parts of the city. Now government officials and civilians are working together to restore basic services in the ravaged neighborhoods.
We in the Khartoum State Water Corporation are working on bringing water services back in these areas. In general, the destruction is huge. It needs a lot of effort from us for the people to get together and help each other, so that our brothers who used to live in these areas to come to their homes. God willing, we will try to bring back the services.
As the residents of Wad Nuwabi, you have seen the situation in the new market area here and at our homes. We ask government officials to give us the opportunity as the youth of Wad Nuwabi to carry out maintenance, to bring back the good scenery of our neighborhood. In order to bring back services, we want to work as youth with official bodies to bring back our families and to hopefully start fasting for the month of Ramadan in our homes.
For much of the conflict, the Sudanese army had been on the defensive after suffering heavy losses in the initial months. Still, as the fighting nears its one-year mark, millions of civilians remain displaced with no access to food or clean water. The clash of egos between the two warring generals has led to one of the biggest humanitarian disasters in all of Africa. And finally, in Latin America, the economic and political crisis in Venezuela is worsening. In fact, Venezuela has a proverbial gun to its head, as it could soon see a return of harsh U.S. sanctions. To keep its economy and energy sector afloat as the threat looms, Caracas is turning towards its ally Iran and is trying to mend ties that frayed over the last year, with the focus on an oil alliance between the two strategic partners. Our next report explains.
The Latin American nation of Venezuela has been gripped in a political and economic crisis since 2015. Over the years, the crisis have only aggravated, forcing over 7.5 million people to leave the country in the last 8 years. Venezuela's oil sector is the most crucial to its economy. In 2019, the United States imposed sanctions on Venezuela's oil industry. Washington gave an ultimatum to Caracas to end its political crisis. This after President Nicolas Maduro was sworn in for a second term, with elections being dismissed as neither free nor fair. In 2020, helping Venezuela in this economic turmoil and alleviating a part of that fuel shortage was Washington's arch foe, Tehran. However, in October last year, Washington loosened some of those sanctions after the Maduro government reached a deal with the opposition to hold free and fair elections in 2024. Once the US restrictions were eased, Venezuela began reprioritizing selling its oil that was originally planned for Iran to other cash-paying nations. As a result, Venezuela fell behind in payments to Iran, and a crucial oil alliance between them began to fray. Now, Venezuela has announced dates for the next presidential elections, but whether they will be free or fair remains in doubt. There is an ongoing systematic crackdown on the opposition, so the threat of a return of harsh US sanctions looms over the Latin American country once again. The oil exemption is due to expire on April 18th. As the situation grows dire once again, Venezuela is turning back towards its strategic partner, Iran. The two countries are reportedly trying to patch together the oil alliance that had begun to fray. Caracas had fallen behind on oil swaps that had boosted crude exports and helped stem domestic fuel shortages. If the US sanctions return, which they most likely will, Caracas will need Iran's support for its oil industry and to keep its energy sector afloat. so it's now rushing to salvage its partnership with Iran. The 3-year-old alliance with Iran involved hundreds of millions of dollars in oil swaps. Venezuela has now accelerated deliveries of heavy crude and fuel cargoes to Iran. Venezuela's oil minister Pedro Tellechea also acknowledged the tattered relationship. The original 2021 deal required Venezuelan oil companies to deliver Iranian state companies at least 2 barrels of oil for every one received. Iran reportedly stopped sending cargoes to Venezuela last May after Caracas fell behind. The two countries, reeling under US sanctions for years, have been aiming to strengthen cooperation. Last year, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi met his Venezuelan counterpart Nicolas Maduro in Caracas. In a veiled reference to Washington, Raisi had said the relation between Iran and Venezuela is not a normal diplomatic relationship, but a strategic one between countries that have common interests and common enemies. In 2022, the two countries vowed to expand bilateral trade volume to $25 billion. According to reports, the current value of ongoing business has not even touched $10 billion. Top officials from both countries have traveled in recent months to push new energy into joint businesses, but the efforts seem to be fading. Can Venezuela mend frayed ties with its strategic partner Iran? Or will Tehran pick a tit-for-tat move and abandon its ally as US sanctions bite?
That's our show for today. We thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.